Thank you, Tom, so much. Welcome, all of you. Thanks for being here. It's an incredible pleasure for me to have come down from Michigan to be here. Thank you also, Travis and Ginger and the whole community here at Georgia Tech. I've experienced my first dose of Southern hospitality, and I know it's a very real thing. So, and it's a great pleasure to read with Barbara Hamby, who I look forward to hearing her poems later. And I don't need to tell you what a huge-hearted human being, poet, and teacher Tom Lux is, because you all know that already. And it'd get pretty sloshy up here if I went into that topic. So I'll hold off on that. But you're lucky to have him here, and I certainly was lucky to study with Tom. I'm going to be reading some newer poems this evening. I'm sort of between books, so I'll be reading some new poems from a manuscript I'm working on. And this first piece concerns Facebook, which, if you're not familiar with it, I imagine most people in the room are. It's a virtual community where you can connect or reconnect or disconnect or peer into the lives of near strangers. On one hand, it's, as I say, sort of life support for friendships that probably really should be dead. On another hand, it's a great way to keep in touch with some people. My dad, who's 80, he friended me. So, and this poem really looks into the whole idea of family members friending each other, and it's called "Maybe Via Social Networking, Dad and I." I'd like to scrawl "I love you" on Dad's wall tonight. Poke him a few times. Maybe he'd LOL my status, give me the old thumbs up. If my feed ever shows he's in the group not crazy, just Catholic, I'd be like, WTF, Pops? WW the Pope think? Then I bet he'd laugh, screen lit. I'll imagine him eyeing my profile, the pics and vids of my kids, all smiles, the miles between us, literal, etc., gone in an instant message, the ravine bridged, as it has been with my now distant sisters and brothers. I know the haunts they're fans of in their far cities, their weather gripes, their 15 top 80s songs, their all-time favorite books, their all-time favorite horror flicks. I know all their all-time stuff. I ace their "How well do you know me" quizzes. Were we all still together watching TV in that dingy basement on Weybridge Drive, our faces blinking in sitcom light, we might go hours, even days, no doubt, without updates, statuses blank, our inner lives offline, bedroom doors and diaries shut. They'd have to wonder at my thoughts, sitting side by side in real time, but unavailable for chat. Now we routinely read each other's minds while scrolling through mutual confabs of cousins we hardly know. Our virtual tree sprouts new shoots daily. Remember our aunt who'd sit drunk and mute each Thanksgiving? She can't hide a fucking thing now. Posting the hourly doings of her cat's litter, sending lame apps, links to crappy songs. I'm defriending her. I'm going to change my privacy settings too. Select the family I want my friends to see. But Dad, good old Dad, though his pic's still a silhouette, tonight I'll switch from invisible. I'll face him, and maybe we'll chat. Having been raised Roman Catholic, Limbos Infantium, as they called it, was a place like purgatory that both intrigued and terrified me. As you probably know, it was essentially a plot of real estate set aside by the church for infant souls, theoretically at least. Well, recently they decided to abolish the idea of limbo, which seemed fine, but I didn't hear anything about a contingency plan for the relocation of those souls. This poem is called Limbos Babies, Softly Falling. Since the 13th century, they've floated in limbo. The souls of dead, unbaptized babies, cooing and orphaned, their moony faces peering out from the clouds of their sweet little death gowns at their mobiles of real stars and planets. St. Gregory of Nazianzus, 329 to 390 A.D., gave birth to the notion of limbo. Prescient enough to know the faithful wouldn't go for the thought of pudgy, unblessed newborns pierced like mini wieners on the pitchforks of demons sitting around hell's eternal campfire. To him and others it seemed half decent, a compromise, whereby these little less than desirable babies could have a celestial cry room, albeit at the far reaches of heaven, so their sinful wailing wouldn't disturb the Lord. St. Augustine of Hippo, 354 to 430 A.D., profoundly disagreed, reasoning that babies, even the snuggliest ones, if they ain't been dunked in the holy pool, then they ain't getting in. Though he added an amendment to the idea that in hell they wouldn't be tortured quite as badly as the rest. 900 years later, when the idea of limbo finally came into being officially, St. Thomas Aquinas began speculation already that maybe limbo shouldn't exist. But it has, for 7 centuries. 7 centuries of this poorly lit backroom nursery in heaven's maternity ward. 7 centuries of screaming babies stained with original sin and spit up. Angels coming and going in the halls with nasal aspirators and burp cloths, stuck caring for the unbaptized dead ones. Until this year, when with one stroke of his pen, gallant in his robe, Pope Benedict declared these babies would no longer be in limbo. At the moment of this edict, limbo's floor and walls evaporated. Whoosh! And the souls of limbo's babies began to fall feather light, down through the spheres, through clouds and soft rain, some settling in streams, some in beds of long grasses, others gently rocking in treetops. And all across the earth, grieving mothers and ghosts of grieving mothers came out into the fields, their arms outstretched, weeping with elation, ready to catch and cradle them. And before God comes to snatch them back to heaven, to carry them, their dead ones, home. A lot of my poems recently are inspired by things I see in the news, as was this one, inspired by a news story about a Buddhist temple that was besieged by killer ants. And for this piece, there are really 2 things that you should know. Buddhists typically or generally want to avoid, harming other beings, and killer ants don't care about harming other beings. This is called Buddhist Temple Ravaged by Ants. And there's an epigraphic quote from one of the monks in the Hang Hak Si Temple, Penang, Malaysia, who was quoted as saying, "When an ant drops on you, you just have to shake it off." Long before the sun's first flicker, a throng of gong-drawn monks lifts like moths from the neutral karma of sleep's dark branches, dons long robes, and floats toward temple for morning meditation. Mindful already, pre-dawn, they pass the Buddha statue, before whose plaster-cast feet, the flame of a lone candle licks black air. Leaving the dust and dew of the path, they lay their sandals at the door and descend into the temple's dim, sweet interior. Soon in full lotus, though outwardly here, they disappear, each monk breath by slow breath burrowing into the topsoil and crust of the flesh, bound for boundless bliss beneath the root of suffering, to exterminate with breathing and chants, desire, the infestation of need. Meanwhile, up from the deep heart of a mound out in the field beyond the temple, a buried, invisible army thrashes, barbed mandibles gnashing upward, advancing toward a needle's eye of light and air. As if manifestations from the seething pit of the soul itself come these legions. Solnopsis invicta, the red fire ant. Maybe they too have come to temple to escape their unfortunate realm, to purify their suffering, these whose slashing teeth burn and can kill. More likely armed for war, single file, they burst from their hellholes at sunrise, a network of tiny lava rivers blazing toward the Bodhi trees, the placid Zendo, the barefoot monks. In a day, they've stormed the place unabated, dancing with their torches in the basement, the porch, the banisters, the beds. As if a lifelong, coal-singed climb toward Nirvana's cool blue oasis isn't a bitch enough already, a handful of monks are taken to the hospital, one who couldn't help but scratch the bite on his inner thigh, each itch spreading a pustule's brush fire across his leg. One brave soul, hoping not to harm any ants, vacuums the mounds, carrying them deep into the woods to shake them off, as if this risky gesture might douse the onslaught or induce a truce. No dice. These ants are pissed at life. So it comes to this. Someone's got to suffer here and now, or in another lifetime, be it monk or ant. And in this battle, the former, without weapons, seems ready to outlast the latter, to stay one rung up on the steep ascent of souls. To me, it's a toss-up. I'd give the upper hand to religious extremists in a battle like this, who might bless themselves, then laser missile or car bomb the colony into eternal oblivion. As for those of us less extreme and not beholden to any noble truths, exterminators advise meeting fire with fire. Torch the queen, drench the mound with pyrethroid, a trickle-down insecticide mixed to scorch the entire lesion in a day. Be sure, however, to wear gloves, wear boots with thick rubber soles, wear earplugs to not hear their chorus of screams, and a mask to obscure their terror-stricken faces as they sizzle, extinguished. I'm going to read a poem now, from my first collection called The Seed Thieves. And going down the long list of our country's wars, there have been quite a bit of diversity in our battles. And we can all talk about how we feel about war and certainly debate that. But one thing we may find agreement on, the names are getting better and better and better. This is called The Man Who Names Wars. We've come so far in the art, from such early shots in the dark as the Revolutionary War, with a far from revolutionary name, 100 Years' War, Oh, please. World War I to end all wars until World War II and counting. The Korean, Franco-Prussian, Vietnam, insert new country, war. In fact, only a couple decent stabs on the whole bloody list. The War of the Roses. And maybe the Civil War, at least an oxymoron. In his defense, whoever held this post then, the man who names wars, probably named these after the fact, or during, while scalped and bleeding on horseback, or limbless in a last haze of morphine, not thinking the rest of us will need to live with these names forever. But now we know the act of naming wars is half the battle, so we're preemptive and precise, finding our target audience long before the war begins. Somewhere deep in the Pentagon, tonight, no doubt, a new think tank's burning midnight oil as we speak. The top brass's army of creative hired guns, those sloganeers who, given the scope of a future mission, are cocking their pens, aiming for a new name. We can only guess where this platoon's been recruited from. A few failed poets pulled from the rank and file, an ex-Hallmark vet fond of Wilfred Owen, and one who went AWOL mumbling Tennyson in 46. Whoever they are, make no bones about it. They know no one will buy it if it doesn't taste just right. It's got to have pizzazz, a fierce logo, spurned Uncle Sam emerging from thunderheads, and a drum roll name that makes even the die-hard doves go hawkish when they see it on Fox. Just listen to these recently labeled products roll in. Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Operation Enduring Freedom, the War on Terror. Can't you feel your heart go full-on bald eagle at these names? It's clear there have been major advances in this field. You can't just call hot sauce hot sauce. Instead, try Sergeant Frank's flamethrower or Jumpin' Jack's ass-kicking fire juice. We've learned a well-named war will scorch the tongue. So in the end, rest assured, there'll be no World War III. But Operation Global Infernal Glory. They're already dipping their quills for that one. I have a couple elegies to read now, and of course with elegies, it doesn't need to be said that I'd much rather have the people back than have these poems. My brother Tom, who I adored, hung himself a handful of years back, and of course, thinking back on him, I thought of this one day, and that inspired this poem. It's called "The Boy Who Taught Me How to Whistle," for Thomas Arthur Fanning. He showed me what to do with the air. My brother. One summer morning when he was 16 and I was 6. How first you lift up your chin like this, move your tongue back a bit, your jaw, now let your tongue rest under your teeth. No, sort of, curl up the sides, kind of like that. Yeah, like a little boat. Okay, now take a deep breath. Now blow it out. I imagine it was nothing but hissing my first several tries, as my brother listened, sitting beside me on the cool cement porch in shade. Maybe it was even days later, when a small wind slipped through my teeth and took on song. And I bet I ran to show him, saying, "Listen, listen." See, no one else knew how to whistle this way. like us, my brother and I. My brother, who left no note, the night he chose nearly 30 years later to stop his breath. My brother, my snap-necked loon, my slack-jawed goner, my stone epiglottis, my brother now hung in his new dark womb, a stopped clapper in an iron bell. My sister Amy died this summer while in surgery, and she lived about 2 hours away from where I am now in Michigan. And I went home, where she lived was also my home at one time, but I went to there for the funeral with my wife and kids, and we stayed in her apartment the day after she died. This is called Staying the Night for Amy Judith Fanning. I want to touch everything she touched yesterday. My fingers lingering on her shelves and counter. I flip through the paperback, left half read on the nightstand. Inhale the crumpled yellow hand towel near her bathroom sink. Breathe in the dust and dander of her apartment air. My wife sifts a pile of unpaid bills, lifts a framed photo, reads an inscription on a birthday card. This home's a sudden museum. From the living room, I hear our daughter knock a glass thing over and giggle. I move to save the breakables from wreckage, then remember, nothing can now be ruined. We're the guests of someone gone. From a stack of papers, I pull some brief note she wrote, marvel at her slight, precise lettering. On her fridge shelf, a tub of leftover spaghetti, an unfinished sandwich. In a drawer, the perishables sweat, a new head of lettuce, a few pieces of fresh fruit. I choose to eat the peach she chose from the grocery's produce rows, not knowing it would outlive her. Later, before we go to sleep in her bed, I see a still life next to the kitchen sink. One white bowl upside down, one fork, one knife, and beside the faucet, her unwashed drinking glass. Lifting the glass, I hope to see her lipstick's usual pink wedge, scour for a fingerprint, some smudge. I fill it half full with water, cover the rim with my lips, turn it in a circle slowly. This is how I kiss my sister goodbye. So, one of the hardest things about my sister's death was having to tell my son, Gabriel, who's 4, about her death, and which we had to do the next morning when he was waking up. And my wife and I, of course, were choking back our sobbing. It was really hard news for us to deliver to him. But he took it really well. He just sort of listened to us and took it in. But a few weeks ago, when his pet Ladybug died, you might have thought the world was coming to an end. This poem is called A Consideration of Possible Afterlives and the Ontological Interrelations of All Beings at Bedtime, or The Ladybug Friend. At the threshold of his bedroom, Gabriel stops mid-skip and kneels, caught by some speck on his floor. Yesterday's ladybug friend, who'd spun and leapt in a cup he kept bedside on a spear of grass, now stuck, stone still, legs up and half crushed. At 4, it's all a matter of science. He leans like a mechanic over a hood, inspecting this insect's dead engine, detached. But within 30 seconds, it's instant crime scene and trial, and I'm his prime suspect. A slack-jawed man of large feet and lumbering, who appears eerily indifferent to this leering judge, handing him his Diego toothbrush like a dagger. Any one of us might have stepped on it, the bug, on her, I mean. My paltry defense begins. To my judge, who's now a quivering heap of tears, and hurled wise, curled up beside Ladybug Friend, repeating her name as he sobs. Seeing after several minutes, this is no toddler drama, but true grief, that we've walked smack into our first real lesson on dying. I shift back and forth for the next hour, from indicted murderer to counselor, from arbiter in an act of God case to source of all solace. Ultimately, I'm some salesman pitching glowing afterlives I haven't even bought myself. He collapses into my arms, sniffling, as I spread a rainbow of spiritual swatches before him. She's in a happier place now, I begin, offering up a tinkling shade. Adding a sunrise tincture, Gabe, your ladybug was a good friend. I'm sure her spirit's doing fine now. Don't worry, I say then, turning to fruit tree hues. She'll probably land on your sleeve this spring, or maybe she'll even become a bird. Later, I proffer a deep rose tone. She lived a good life and is probably higher in the sky than she's ever flown. His grief ceaseless. My spectrum nearly spent. I try an earth tone. Let's remember to love each other as much as we loved Ladybug Friend. Still no deal. I reach for sheer enamel. Let's enjoy this moment we share here and now with each other. But that only opens into another empty space, as he then draws a wobbled line from the black dot of Ladybug Friend to his dead aunt, my sister, gone only a handful of months. Is Aunt Amy with Ladybug Friend then too? He asks, seeing through all of my pitches and easy patches, looking me square in the eyes. At that point, I reach the blank page, a place no paint or creed holds. He has thrown open every curtain to find his father, dumb backstage wizard, fool in tears on the edge of his bed. When I manage to speak again, I say to my son, the truth is no one really knows where she's gone. For a long time, we hold each other, staring at nothing. In the end, we lift what's left of the ladybug onto a tissue, lay it on his nightstand. He hands me a yellow marker, dictates the eulogy he wants written beneath her. We love you. Please come back. Before my wife Denise and I got married, she saw an ad for a wedding butterfly release. You mail order these butterflies that you then let go at your wedding. It's a fantastically beautiful idea, at least in theory. This poem is called The Release. 2 weeks before our wedding day, the chrysalids arrive by mail. Lined in stacks of white shirt boxes, the would-be painted ladies don't stir for several days, though we, the bride and groom-to-be, follow the instructions closely, keeping them in the dark, room temperature. After a week of silence from these square coffins beneath our bed, I begin to secretly suspect a hoax, that the ad my fiancé had seen for this wedding butterfly release, her gorgeous gauzy hopes pinned on the great metaphor of it, might just be some sick trick played by a bitter triple divorcee. That maybe these tiny cooped-up cocoons we can't peek at might be mere stones, stubbed butts of cigarettes, or wadded-up alimony notices from the court. An August heat wave doesn't help, as we lay nightly side by side, wondering if our baby butterflies have fried in their little shells. Until one evening comes the first scratch, a skittery twitching in one of the boxes, then another, as we lean in, all ears, giddy as a couple kids listening to popcorn kernels bursting into bloom. The night before the wedding, we open the boxes to see the cocoons, a field of bronze, unearthed seeds, some stirring, others wobbling from side to side, itching to escape. I'm not too big on insects, born or unborn. So I watch as my fiancé scoops them up, one by one, with a plastic spoon, placing them into small white cardboard pyramids, each secured with a silver ribbon. The quiet ones, the company guarantees a certain percentage of failure. She carries outside, scattering them on parched grass. In the blaze of our big day, post vows and kiss, pronounced man and wife, we announce to the crowd before us, sweat-drenched and fanning themselves with programs, to lift the pyramids from beneath their chairs, and on the count of 3, release what we hoped would be butterflies. Thank goodness that in the collective gasp and delight of the flapping of hundreds of wings upward, no one noticed, not even my new wife at first, as my butterfly, though freed from its cocoon, spiraled, dead already, down to the stone step of the outdoor altar to bounce inaudibly and broken-winged into the bushes below. Horrified for a moment, looking down there for the lost corpse, I smiled and smoothed my wedding suit as it was time to march arm in arm toward the horse-drawn carriage. I hadn't time to dwell then on the grand, hopefully meaningless implications of my insect's aborted flight, but knew deep down already this would not be the last time a metaphor would let me down. There's more to life, of course, than stupid metaphors, and hers at least soared. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to finish with this poem. Another poem inspired by a TV news item about a story about a deer that got lost and burst into a department store, a large chain department store you'll probably recognize the name of. This poem is called A Deer in the Target. I only got a 10-second shot. Grainy footage of the huge deer caught in the crosshairs of a ceiling security camera. A scene of utter chaos in a strip mall store, shown on the late local news. The beautiful beast clearly scared to death in this fluorescent forest, its once graceful legs giving out on mopped floors. Think Bambi as a fawn, its first time standing. Seeing the frantic, scattering shoppers, you'd think a demon had barged into this temple of commerce. As they sacrificed their merchandise, stranded full carts, and dove for cover. And when the aisles were emptied of these bargain hunters, who was left but an army of brave, red-shirted team members, mobilized by the store manager over the intercom to drive this wild animal out? I wager there's nothing on this in the How to Approach an Unsatisfied Shopper section in the Target Employee Handbook. But there they were, the cashiers and stockers, the floor supervisor, the assistant floor supervisor, the store manager, the assistant store manager, the district associate manager, the district supervisor, the district assistant supervisor, and visiting members from the regional corporate office, running after it running after them, bullseye logos on their red golf shirts. Everyone frenzied and panting, razor hooves clattering on the mirror-white floor tiles, nostrils heaving, its rack clearing off-season clothes from clearance racks. All of them in Target, chasing the almighty buck. Thank you so much. Thanks.